Welcome to the All People podcast, where we talk all people all the time. I'm your host, Alysa Southall. My goal is to improve candidate and employee experiences as well as company cultures throughout U.S. employers. We do this by leading with empathy, diversity, inclusion, equality, teamwork, and transparency. Come on this journey with me. Welcome, and thank you for being here. As you heard, I'm Alysa Southall, and I'm happy to be bringing you the All People podcast, where we talk all people all the time. To start off, I want to explain the usage of people. So, I want to define people for you all as candidate, job seeker, employee, right? Sometimes it's going to be defined as leader or, CEO, right? But a lot of times it's going to be focused on job seeker, employee, right? Those types of people. And it's going to be transferable. So you'll have to, relate it as you hear it. But I use the word people a lot. And generally it's a grouping. You'll see the use of the word people as well, pretty fluidly in our newsletter, the All People periodical that will come out in conjunction with our podcast. So that being said, I want to talk a little bit more about the people aspect. So I believe in promoting people first cultures throughout and supporting companies in their pursuit to create people first cultures. We've spent a lot of years being and creating cultures that were not people first, right? It was, the employer is the deciding principle or the deciding, the decision maker, right? And then everybody else follows sort of in line. We need to be people first focused. And I try to align myself with other groups and individuals and organizations that have this people first mindset. One of our speakers that already is lined up is going to come on and talk to us about people first and why it's extremely important. So stay tuned for that topic. Particularly when it comes to my approach, right? People first is really important because your employees, everybody has this saying about we treat your customers the best, right? Because they're going to go and spread the word about your product. However, I also see the same thing to be true for employees. Employees are your brand ambassadors. If your employees are happy, they are going to tell everybody. If they are unhappy, they are going to tell everybody. So because of that, make sure that your people are feeling like you're putting them first. Without them, your business does not run. So I'm going to say that again for you. Without your employees, your business does not run. Even if you're a solopreneur, right? If I wasn't here, my business doesn't run. If I'm MIA. So understanding the value that your employees bring to your organizations, the customers or vendors that you provide support to, that's why people first is important. And when we put people first, it means we have to lead with empathy. We have to lead with compassion. We have to lead with transparency, right? We have to be compassionate individuals and be empathetic because that's what being people first requires. So that's how we approach things here at my business, A People Partner, and why we believe in being people first all the time. But if businesses are not currently in that people first mindset, myself, my partners can certainly help you get there because that's where you need to be in order to keep up with the growing changes of the market. I am the CEO and founder of A People Partner, and I'm passionate about recruiting. I'm passionate about people operations. I'm passionate about human resources. But there was a lot of areas where those functions are falling flat, right? And people first is one of those. And no matter how much I encouraged leaders and organizations to make those changes, to put people at the forefront of their decisions, to be open communicators, to be transparent about the decisions being made internally, I couldn't get them to buy into that model. It just was not part of their mindset or the way that they wanted to operate. People have to learn it in different ways, and I understand that. But I wanted to start a business where I could help companies see this from a different lens, having an outside person come in and say, you need to change whatever approach you have, whether the leadership is the problem, whether the company values are the problem, whether there's just one piece of the puzzle that's causing the challenge. Looking at the whole puzzle and trying to solve that problem. From the recruitment side, I really enjoy, going out and helping organizations find talent and helping them to understand how the companies are in their own way in terms of hiring talent. So many of you job seekers out there probably know know the companies I'm going to talk about, but there are companies out there who are putting you through nine-step interview processes, right? Or there's a hiring manager that's going rogue and saying something that they shouldn't say, or companies that won't tell you what their pay is for a particular role, no matter how many times you ask. So these processes and practices get in the company representative's way when they're trying to hire talent. Some other things that come to mind are job descriptions. Job descriptions notoriously get in the way of hiring talent, right? There's these arbitrary set of rules that somebody created maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and nobody's touching those, nobody's looking at them, but probably they're not required in your role. In another podcast, I'll talk deeper about that. But for an example, for now, think about when you have an education listed, right? If this is a role that you're saying education is required, does everybody in that role internally have the same level of education that you're requiring? Or is this just an arbitrary requirement on the role because somebody a long time ago required that every job that they hired for have these, educational requirements? Something to consider. And so part of what I do is I help companies understand how their own internal processes are getting in their way of hiring the talent that they need. That's one piece. And that's one of the things I love about recruitment. You'll be able to get an insight into some of the topics on recruitment that I'll cover if you check out my ebook, which is the secret formula of hiring talent, ... It's not so secret. There'll be a lot of times where I cover topics from there during one of these podcast sessions. Additionally, I say people operations and human resources about being passionate about both. The landscape of what we used to consider human resources is really changing, right? So we're moving into this people operations function, or have already started to move into this people operations function, where we should go. When individuals think of the words human resources, I often think of a legal shield, administrative support, benefits, the place where I go when I get in trouble, right? Those are some quick off the cuff thoughts about what people might anticipate when they hear human resources. In the scope of things, right? Human resources covers a whole breadth depending on what the organization, puts under that purview. It can include payroll. It's definitely benefits, employee relations, recruitment, performance management, right? Training, learning and development, employee experience, candidate experience, right? There's a whole slew of things that come into play, wellness, engagement, that HR is responsible for, or not necessarily responsible for solely, but are responsible for helping to drive. And so this is where I think the people operations is really getting into play, is helping companies to understand that although we are the stewards of these particular functions, they do not happen in a silo with just HR by themselves. And the people operations title and designation starts to move us closer to that people focus approach. So I'm appreciative of those companies that are changing their human resources titles to people operations, because they understand that the focus should be on the people side and focusing on that people first culture, which sometimes that approach to human resources doesn't always have. And so, on that same token, on the people operations, right, I said it's moving the right direction. One of the things that used to happen very frequently is that HR was that legal shield for the organization. It was like, okay, HR, go and deploy this policy, make sure that it's compliant so that we don't get sued or so that we're not discriminating. So as much as, the company used to be that legal shield where we would deploy those policies and implement these processes, that's not what HR was really designed for. So what I mean by that, in multiple situations, I've worked for companies where an employee would come and tell me something, and it was something that was an area of improvement that we could make internally. And when it was brought to leadership, leadership wanted to know who had the concern. To me, I was always taking the approach of it doesn't matter who has the concern. The concern is there and we need to address it. I wanted to put a barrier between the employee who is voicing the concern and the company who is seeing it as a negative. But again, going back to that legal aspect, it was, okay, company, make sure that every time we terminate somebody, we follow the same process. Or, hey, HR person, make sure every time we terminate somebody, we follow the same process so that there's no discrimination, that there's no potential lawsuits pending, right? But it's more than just that legal protection that HR provides. We need to be a resource for the employees, right? Human resources. We need to be a resource that they can trust to provide information to that they know is going to be valued, heard, and kept confidential. And so in an example I gave you, multiple times when concerns would come up, it was always, well, who said it? And my answer, sort of off the cuff, was the person who said it didn't matter, right? The person themselves mattered. But in the terms of getting this problem resolved, knowing who said it doesn't matter. Why don't you help me to fix the problem? And then I will go and communicate back to the people or person that needs to be communicated to regarding this particular issue or challenge or problem, etc. Whereas, the company representatives wanted to know who were the complainers, who were the people that were unhappy, right? And sort of labeling that as, oh, that person is always unhappy. Well, are they the voice of the employee population, or are they a voice of one? Because chances are other people feel the way that they feel. So rather than labeling them, let's fix the problem. Let's go ahead and tackle that challenge. And so when we're moving into this people operations function, we're getting closer to the point of, having that people first approach, right? And when you look at, the definition of that people operations, it's proactively focusing on employee engagement and retention, as well as leadership and management strategies, right? And that comes directly from Workable. So human resources is that approach of focusing on policy, right? And Jessica Winder has a great article about this that she published in October of 2022. But, people operations is more focused on holistic level, right? And on looking at the employee from a holistic level, right? So you're having an approach where you understand physical and mental well-being, balancing work-life balance, right? And everything that, that's not necessarily that policy side, right? That might be built into the functions and the responsibilities, but things like culture development, project management, goal setting, right? Change management, employee loyalty. Those are some of Jessica's examples. And so we're going from this whole, legal shield policy compliance side to a more focus on how do we create a culture that's better for our people, that focuses on how to make improvements for our people, employees, right? And like I said, I'll make sure Jessica Winder's post is in here because she does, she defines it and separates it out pretty well. And so, all of that leads into my goal here at A People Partner. My goals that I set for my organization were to create, improve employee experiences, improve candidate experiences, and improve the culture of companies throughout the US, right? I think that there are other countries that, do things some better than us, right? In terms of, paid leave and that kind of focus, where we certainly need to improve. And then there are some areas where we do better, but I'm focused right now on fixing that landscape in the US to improve those three functions, which probably will mean sort of moving those companies away from that human resources focus and more into a people operations focus, giving them that people first mindset. Sure, you may still have to do some of those other responsibilities that come with human resources, right? Policies and benefits and all of those things, but your mindset is more about the people side and their physical and mental well-being. And so off the top in the intro here, you heard our values at a people partner: diversity, empathy, equality, inclusion, teamwork, and transparency. Those were selected because I believe in those six values and I believe in living them every day. Additionally, right, I want whoever I employ or support or work with to have those same values in the forefront of their mind. And in most cases, HR and recruiting functions should have those in the forefront of what they do as well. And so, I encourage you to check out my website. You can look at the merch that we have available for sale that falls in line with those values. And so on that topic, with those values in mind and these other focuses of people first and people operations versus HR, I want to share with you sort of what I envision this to look like, what I envision this podcast to bring to all of you as listeners. So I anticipate that, the list of speakers we're going to be able to have for you will include everybody from, members of leadership teams, HR functions, people operations professionals, right? Career coaches, wellness and engagement folks, everybody sort of across the board that impacts employees in some shape or form. We're going to have a whole different grouping of speakers that run the gamut on their experience level. And I think will really bring you a different insight into the types of cultures we're promoting. But again, this is not just going to be for leaders to hear and make improvements. This is also going to be geared, there's going to be some episodes that are geared primarily towards job seekers and tips and tools that they can use as they go out on their job search, or even ways to increase their mood during a frustrating process like job seeking. So there's going to be some focus on that job seeker element, as well as that guidance toward leaders and companies. And then there's also going to be, support toward employees and really trying to help change that narrative and that landscape. So I think you're going to be really excited about the speakers that we're going to have. I encourage you that if you have topics that you're interested in, that you do not hesitate to share them with us. I'd love to have speakers that resonate with you all, topics that resonate with you all, and really go from there. How I would like to end every podcast. So I listen to a podcast myself, and one of the podcasts that I listen to, he always ends the same way by asking a particular question to his guests. And so mine is a quote followed by a question that leads to that quote. So one of my favorite poets of all time is Maya Angelou. May she rest in peace. And she had this great quote that I think is really transforming or can transcend into the business model, which is, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so that is always going to lead me to ask any one of my guests that's on the show, can they share an experience for me where in an organization they felt a particular way, right? So that can mean different things for different people. They might remember a positive experience where they were made to feel like they were appreciated, valued, engaged, whatever those quick emotions that come off their head are. For me, right, I'm going to try to share a story with you about how I was made to feel at employers throughout my time. And so it's all about creating these examples of how we remember the way that we felt during particular situations. And why that's important is because I want companies to understand that the way that they make their people feel is so much more important than they realize. So for me, right, in many of the cultures I've been in, I've been, I've been made to feel like I was too young to understand what being a leader really meant. I was made to feel like that my age was, me being the age I was, made me not be able to grasp the concepts of these bigger leadership initiatives, right? And so I was made to feel like the experience I'd gained and the knowledge I'd acquired over the course of my career wasn't as applicable because of this thing like age. And so, that was one of the experiences that I've had where I can't remember exactly what people did or what they said, but I remember the way I felt, which was that, regardless of the experience I'd gained or the knowledge I'd acquired over my career, over my educational pursuits, right? Nobody was letting me actually try it. Nobody was actually letting me into that landscape or giving me proof that I didn't understand it. They were just saying because I was young, I hadn't risen through the ranks, right? And those weren't exact words, but I remember feeling like I cannot be a leader until I'm older, which isn't true, right? You have leadership qualities. We all have leadership qualities, or many of us have them inside of us early on. And some leaders who have risen through the ranks shouldn't be leaders, plain and simple, right? So I was made to feel as though I could never get out of this cycle of, I couldn't be a leader until I was older, which wasn't true. So again, right, this is how I'm going to sort of end every podcast, asking somebody to provide an example that goes along with that quote by Maya Angelou, which is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Because I think we all have something that we can relate to that experience where something happened and we remember how we felt about that particular moment, situation, experience, but we may not remember what was said and what was done to make us feel that way. I'm going to tag an article that corresponds with that quote. I'm also going to tag Jessica Winder's post. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of insight into who our speakers might contain. Also drop a link into the merch. But certainly, I enjoyed our time today, and I look forward to having you all as listeners. Stay tuned. This is going to be an interesting ride, and I think you'll enjoy what we have to say. So speakers will come soon, and thank you so much. I encourage you to lead with empathy and act with kindness. Have a great day, y'all. Bye. Thank you for listening to All People Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. The work doesn't end here. If you want to keep the conversation going, find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or visit my website, apeoplepartnerllc.com. Lead with empathy and act with kindness. Have a great day.